Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Judy presiding. This is On Trial, the podcast where we debate the merits of film. And tonight, there is no prosecution, there is no defense, there is only Zool. We are having one of our plea bargain episodes here as we are going to less debate and more just generally talk about this wacky movie that Witney Seibold has been going on about, Mandy. The 2018 Nicolas Cage vehicle directed by Panos Cosmatos and produced by, of all people, Elijah Wood of Lord of the Rings fame. And once again, joining us second time after our Hoofcore trilogy of reviews, Witney Seibold of critically acclaimed and now Slash Film. How do you do, sir?
Hello, I'm doing quite well. You say that Elijah Wood is best known for, what was it, Lord of the something?
Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Lord of
I
the
don't know if you've heard of it.
Not a fan. But Elijah Wood, to my eye, is best known for producing these kinds of movies. He has his own production company. Mm-hmm. It's called Spectre Vision, not Spectre Vision. And he has produced a good number of very strange, very ambitious, not always great, but always interesting horror movies over the course of the last decade or so. Let's see if I can think of somebody. Like he did, I think he produced the remake of Maniac that he was in. Okay. He did Mandy, which is, very important. He did a really strange film called Come to Daddy. He produced The Boy, not the one with the ventriloquist dummy, but the 2015 film. Okay. He also did a really utterly revolting movie, which I'm very, very fond of, called The Greasy Strangler. So this is sort of like a new wrinkle in his career. Started as an actor when he was a young child, continued to act into his adulthood, but now he's producing a lot of really strange, really ambitious movies. He was the one who brought us A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, if you ever saw that one, the Anna Lily Amirpour movie. Mm-hmm. He has a very interesting and eclectic sense of taste when it comes to horror, and I'm here for it, because if he's going to give us more things like Mandy, then that's great. I just want to see what Spectre Vision does. Elijah Wood has always been close to my heart. He's also been like something of a celebrity crush of mine for a long time. So that he's producing movies that are right up my alley only endears me to him that much more.
I was reading about that too, the Spectre Vision and what it specialized in. And I was thinking about this movie as I watched it. And I literally just got done watching it about an hour ago. And so the whole reason we're doing this was just to kind of get everyone caught up to speed. We had you on the talk about Pig. And when we were talking about Pig, this came up, and you were very insistent, like, you got to see Mandy, you got to see Mandy. And I said, okay, I'll throw it on, like Captain America, I'll throw it on the list. And then I heard you doing your end of the year wrap up with William Bibbiani on Critically Acclaimed, and Pig came up again. And then again, you're like, William, you got to see Mandy, you got to see Mandy. And I'm interested in what other people are like passionate about when everyone kind of gets to be in their bonnet about a very particular thing, especially if I've never heard of it. I want to know what that thing is, and I want to hear what their thoughts are. So I took this as an opportunity. I was like, Witney seems very passionate about this movie. He seems like he really needs to talk about it with somebody. I want that someone to be me. So I watched this movie, and hearing you and your sort of frustration with the mass media film culture, I get why you like this movie. This was wacky on a lot of levels. I enjoyed the oddity of it. But it did get me thinking, coming back to the point where you last left off, about how we get so caught up in the major $200 million motion picture industry, especially with the way film is now, where film they have to be events for people to come out of the house, that you often forget that there still exists at the other end of the spectrum, the very niche art house, weirdo, small picture. Like this one.
I mean, these movies never stop getting made. It's just a matter of where you can find them. And there was this pretty glorious time when you could go see a blockbuster and then go to the theater next door and see a little indie picture like Mandy, at least here in Los Angeles. I know it's different in other cities across the country and all over the world.
I know,
theaters seem. Yes.
Sorry, you froze, and I wasn't sure if you were coming back. Go ahead.
Just I know that theaters are being sort of earmarked for big events now, because that's what's making a lot of money. Just recently, a Spider-Man film was released. You may have heard of it. And
a Spider what now? Are you talking about like Spider Lady?
A Spider-Man art. If you're familiar with Ariadne from Ovid's Metamorphoses, kind of like that, but in a modern context.
Okay.
But
you would, if it's possible to be booed off the internet, you and I are getting close.
But that movie, pandemic or not, still made a gazillion dollars adjusted for inflation, and it's kind of proving more and more that more resources are going to go into fewer films when it comes to presentation. It means that the gigantic event blockbusters, it's going to be a lot like Broadway, where you're going to either spend a lot of money or not, but going to a single film is going to be this gigantic most of the day event. Everything is going to be the gigantic event because there's only going to be maybe a dozen movies a year released in this fashion. And during the pandemic, when a lot of theaters were closing because people couldn't gather, all of these really interesting indie films started moving online because there was already a home there for a lot of streaming and online rentals and getting things, even on your phone. Well, why didn't Quibi succeed? I don't know. But as such, it's just a matter of where you're looking.
Yeah.
You can find this stuff. It's all out there. It's just not going to be in theaters. And I think we just need to accept that theaters aren't the primary means by which people are getting their films anymore. It's okay to assume that home video is a legit way to take in your cinema.
Yes. Well, I think Netflix has normalized that. But I mean, what Mandy reminds me of is before wide release became the norm, sort of the regional circuit for a motion picture, where you would get a picture in your local drive-in, but it would only be in like that region. You would get these limited theater distribution for films, and so if you saw it in Los Angeles, you might not see it in Wyoming or North Carolina or something things like that. And we're almost coming back around to it, but instead of it being, physically in a limited distribution, now it's on Shudder, or it's on Netflix or it's on Hulu. So as you said, to kind of come back around to that point, this stuff is getting made because now the long tail of infinite shelves is available to put as much of this stuff there. And as a matter of fact, we're almost at a point now where I think you have these streaming services that are hungering for it. I brought this up on previous podcasts before, where COVID, among other things, really pushed forward the need for content for these streaming services well before they were ready for them. And so they're struggling now. You see Disney's pulling Turning Red out of the theaters and putting it up on Disney Plus because they don't have enough to retain subscribers. And so a lot of stuff that was even marketed for theaters is getting pulled, or they're doing day and date, like Universal's Marry Me is day and date on Peacock, things like that. So, but go ahead.
So we just need to keep in mind, and we're off topic here. We'll get back to Mandy at some point, but we need to recall that the streaming services we shouldn't view them like theatrical versus straight to VHS like we did back in the day, whereas a theater was a legit release and a straight to VHS was somehow a lesser one. And Netflix and Disney, that the streaming service is actually their primary mode now. The theater is secondary.
Right.
So if something gets released in theaters, it's either a giant event or it's nothing at all. And if they are giving something be seen as their premium conveyance. That's how they're trying to get it to you. Pulling Seeing Red out of theaters isn't an insult to Seeing Red. Putting it on their streaming service is the Tiffany item. It's like the special treatment.
Yeah, tell that to the people at Pixar.
Well, the people at Pixar think the way a lot of us do, that the theater was supposed to be the primary means of seeing these things. And a lot of filmmakers are still making with that in mind, whereas Disney is already ahead of that. They've seen the writing on the wall. They're already pushing everything to their streaming. When it comes to like some of their Star Wars stuff, I know they were going to do movies and now they're doing TV shows instead of the movie, because nobody's going to see the Obi-Wan Kenobi the movie, but everyone's going to tune in to see Obi-Wan Kenobi the TV series. That's more important now.
I follow I can't remember the name of the account, but it's one of these accounts that tracks views on streaming services and television and whatnot, and they have an Instagram account. That's where I follow them. And so like something like the Book of Boba Fett or Hawkeye or any one of these shows, and like the next thing you see is 1 billion people watched it. Red Notice is actually a really good example of this. Apparently like Red Notice was like the most watched movie on Netflix like in its history.
Wow.
Yeah, what a garbage movie that was. No accounting for taste, but in sheer volume it was a winner. And to your point earlier, and then we'll jump into Mandy. Look at some of the Best Picture nominees in the past 2 or 3 years. They've been on Netflix. The power, like we're going to be talking about The Power of the Dog on Monday, and that's I think in line for a Best Picture nominee. And there's a whole bunch more like that. Last year, I think that what was the Best Picture nominee for winner rather for 2020 was Nomadland, and that was a Hulu exclusive after its short run in the theater. The other ones were like Mank and The Father, and Mank was a Netflix exclusive, and it just goes on and on like that. So you're not wrong in any way, shape, or form. I think like we're back in the age of, if you want to see the this small, silly little low budget movie, you can. It's there for you. You just got to speak into your remote and say, "Find me this movie," and it'll be there. So, so Mandy is a weirdo flick. Tell the people. I want to let you explain this. Tell the people what Mandy is about. What happens in this movie?
Well, what happens in this movie? Mandy is, I suppose you could say it's a revenge movie, but I mean, it's so much more stylish than that. Mandy stars Andrea Riseborough. She's the title character, and Nicolas Cage, who is her husband, and they are aging metalheads. They still have the metal t-shirts. They love listening to metal music, and the world is very abstract and colorful because they love each other so much. Everything's seeps into clouds of purple and maroon, and Andrea Riseborough appears out of these colors just to sort of show that she's filling Nicolas Cage's heart. And
it's like a Pink Floyd album come to life.
Well, the whole movie is like a heavy metal album cover. It takes place inside a heavy metal album cover, and like their love is so pure and beautiful that it changes the world into something really abstract. And importantly, their love of heavy metal music is seen as a way to enhance the fantasy of their love rather than this sort of dark worship of death. If you listen to metal music, it's about the worship of death. Most metal songs are about death or murder or something really horrible happening in your life, disease. Listen to Metallica; all of their songs are about death. You listen to black metal, Norwegian black metal; those are about awful stuff. And it does point out that listening to this kind of music and living in the heavy metal mindset isn't the thing that attracts death to you. And in fact, the antagonist of this movie, played by Linus Roache, he plays, the movie takes place in 1983, and he plays sort of this ex-hippie cult leader, and they've taken way too much LSD. To the point where their brains are kind of damaged. And he's this guy is believed that now that he actually does have magical powers and he is a messiah. And this cult kidnaps Mandy and takes her back to their compound. When he kind of gives this long highfalutin speech about the importance of his body and how he's going to be the messiah. And then he takes his clothes off and she laughs at his dick. And Right, and rightfully so. It's the appropriate reaction, but this angers him so that they end up killing her.
Right.
They kidnap Nicolas Cage, so he's privy to all of this that's happening. Also in their employ, and this is a very bizarre wrinkle, is a race of motorcycle Hellraiser Cenobites from hell. They're clearly not human. They don't have faces. They wear like leather masks with spikes on them, and they wear leather, but they drive motorcycles, and they need a place to live. They don't live in like a hell dimension, because Nicolas Cage will catch up with them eventually, and we see one of these Hellraiser Cenobites living in this dumpy little tiny house, watching porn and snorting cocaine off the coffee table. So,
like you do.
Like a Cenobite from hell might do.
Sure.
But Red is Nicolas Cage's name. He after he witnesses this horrendous death of his most beloved, sits down in front of the television, and he sees a commercial, like this completely inane television commercial for a macaroni and cheese product called Cheddar Goblin. And I'm wearing my Cheddar Goblin t-shirt. You can see that on camera. And seeing how inane the outside world is causes him to snap a little bit. And it's the thing that kind of motivates him into creating this heavy metal battle axe that he forges himself on his property, and goes out to seek revenge. And he goes out to seek revenge on the weird Cenobite monsters as well as the cult leaders. It's not an action-packed Death Wish kind of fantasy, though. The murders are just as strange and abstract as the opening sequences. But the opening sequences, whereas they're gentle and have a lot of soft colors, the end sequences are a lot harder. They're a lot more harder edged. There's a lot more, lot less sort of sound effects. And everything is now red and black and really angular. So the whole second part of the movie is Nicolas Cage murdering guys and throwing his axe and staving their skulls in, and confronting the Linus Roache character, and the Linus Roache character it seems like he's not even really fully comprehending what's going on here. But Nicolas Cage kind of enters this abstract headspace and ends up getting his revenge. And one of the last shots of the movie is the camera pulls up, and it looks, and there's like multiple planets in the sky, and it looks like a heavy metal album cover. So we realize this is where this whole movie has been set, is in this sort of, it's like an essay on the nature of heavy metal. It's funny.
You use the phrase heavy metal, and it's obviously to describe a genre of music, but it actually reminded me of the Heavy Metal magazine. The more you talked about the more you brought that up as a sort of an aesthetic and a motif. I was like, you know what? Having seen the movie and having read a bunch of issues of heavy metal, I'm like, that seems to be the direction this was pointed in. A couple of things: the axe that he's carrying around, I was reading, was supposed to be made to look like the F from Celtic Frost from the band.
Nice. Okay.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about again this movie is the color paletting on this. I actually thought, because I watched this on Plex, a friend of mine got a copy of it and watched it there, and I was like, at first I thought there was something wrong with like the cinematography in this. It's like, why does it keep fading out like that? And it's like, it's supposed to be, the movie is sort of supposed to be the very psychedelic in a way. It's supposed to have a psychedelic aesthetic. The colors fade in and out. The scenes fade in and out. Sometimes there's like 80-yard dialogue over just black nothingness, things like that. You are supposed to be, as an audience member, transported to like another place, which is weird because the initial setting is just this house by the lake, and it's just a normal couple doing normal living by the lake stuff. But as it goes on, it kind of also doubles as like a descent into madness for Nicolas Cage. He's obviously traumatized by the kidnapping and then subsequent immolation of his girlfriend, his wife, and all of that. And there's this really great scene where after he wakes up from all of that, he downs a bottle of vodka and has this really primal scream in the kitchen. It's one of the things we talked about with Pig, where, you know, his performance was so good, but it was understated. Like, this is all the stuff that everyone talks about with Nicolas Cage, like going crazy, but in a very pointed way, you know, where it's appropriate for what they're trying to get across in this movie.
The conversation around Nicolas Cage is a little limiting because people do focus on that craziness you were talking about. This idea that Nicolas Cage only does the crazy stuff. He's very good at playing crazy, but he's a good enough actor to know when to employ that energy and when not to.
Right.
He's not the guy you hire because he's like a crazy guy who can only do crazy performances. He's just an actor who happens to be very good at giving some pretty extreme performances.
Weirdly, I kept thinking about National Treasure while I was watching this, and the reason why I was like, how is the guy that was the lead in National Treasure, you know, this goofy takeoff of Indiana Jones in a very sanitized like Disney World, is also the same guy in Mandy? That's quite the range.
Yeah, I think that's what we're looking at here. A lot of people don't understand that Nicolas Cage is an actor with a great deal of range. And in recent years, there's been this sort of reconsideration of his career, and the reconsideration is that he's only crazy, but he's not. He actually does a heck of a lot more than what we see, and I think Mandy is a good example of that because he's actually very soulful and very gentle in the first half of this movie. He has a great deal of relatable, almost adolescent affection for Mandy. How he looks at her and how he sees every detail of her face and seems to love every bit of that. He's not a kook in those early scenes. No. He's actually giving a very humane performance in those early scenes, and the kind of self-aware gag, if there is one, is that he's like this metalhead guy who's wearing the kind of shirt you might wear when you're 13 with the tiger on it. And he's playing like this sort of overgrown metalhead dude. And the message here is that those overgrown metalhead dudes and their overgrown metalhead girlfriends are actually incredibly healthy and have a better relationship than you'll ever have. And the love and the affection that he feels is genuine. It's not something. He's not overplaying any of that. Right. And he's in a very stylized movie, and you know, by the end, he's committing these extreme acts of violence, and he's bugging his eyes out, and he's covered in blood, and that's exciting. But that's meant as a contrast to the first half of the movie, where everything was very gentle, and he's actually very calm and clean.
We were joking around about Spider-Man before, and I'm linking that to the second half of the movie where it gets very graphic. I was thinking about Evil Dead a lot, Sam Raimi's Evil Dead, and how I know this is described as like psychological thriller and horror, but much like Evil Dead, with a lot of the kills, I was laughing hysterically. And I'm typically not a gore hound. I don't like gross, but like, I can't tell if this was purposeful or what they were going with here. But when he goes into the trailer and he fights the first, I'm going to use your word, when he fights the first Cenobite, the Cenobite. The other thing about this is again, he's not a superhero. He's like losing half of these fights, and then he somehow finds a way to get through it. So the Cenobites on top, like, mounted him, and he's going in for the kill, and Nicolas Cage is able to get out of the situation. But the camera is focused on Nicolas Cage, and whatever, I guess he impaled him in some way, but the guy is just pouring blood all over Nicolas Cage's face. It's like, and that's where the movie kind of breaks me, where like I was really intently watching for the first part of it, trying to figure this movie out, thinking about like, what is it about Witney Seibold that likes this movie? Why when I said it to one of my friends, he's like, "Oh my God, you're gonna watch that?" Like it was a challenge. It's like, good luck. I was trying to figure those things out as I'm actively watching this, and then this movie takes the switch, and I'm laughing so hard at the over the top bloodiness of the thing. And what makes it even funnier is Nicolas Cage. as he's being covered in blood, has this ridiculous face about him. So the whole thing just sort of snaps me out of the seriousness of the movie, and I'm like, okay, we've hit silly land now. And but silly, and again, the way that the Evil Dead was silly, where it was gross and it was graphic at times, but it was also nutty, and enjoyable. I know people are huge fans of it. So fast forward, there's a scene, and you in your synopsis, you didn't mention it. He doesn't just kill these people. At one point, he's in a chainsaw duel.
Okay, yeah, that's a detail I could have mentioned.
Yeah, look, I know there's a lot of things we see just repeated throughout our action and horror movies, but it's rare when I get to see an actual chainsaw duel happening, and I laughed pretty hard at that. And what was even funnier was how it was choreographed, because one guy, the guy he's fighting, has a super long chainsaw, just a ridiculously long one, and he's got a short one, and he actually disarm him and get in close and whatnot. I was laughing pretty hard at all that. And then fast forward again to the climactic scene. He's finally gotten to our boss villain. He's gotten to our cult leader, which, and I laughed at this too for a different reason. Do cult leaders ever have a different motivation other than God said I can have everything I want? And what does that tell us about the psychology of people who land there? Because I feel like every time I come across a cult leader in fiction, it's always well, because God spoke to me and said I can be a total brat and have anything I want, and they say it a lot better than that, but that's basically the gist of it. And it's like, this is what cultism is all about, just having no self-control. Go ahead, Whitney.
Well, I mean, the whole idea that stems from a lot of those utopian cults from the 1960s, if you're familiar with some of them. Stuff like Jonestown, of course, is the biggest example, but this idea that a charismatic leader provides all of the answers, don't they? And that's what attracts the followers. They're looking for somebody with answers. Whereas as time passes, it's proven time and time again that the leaders of these things only want power. It's not about what most religious bodies tend to focus on. If you look at what's the underlying philosophy of most religions, you'll find that it's the destruction of the ego. It's about breaking down the self rather than vaunting it. And as such, it's sort of this misinterpretation of a lot of religious doctrine, that if there is a God in this sort of hierarchy of certain religions, certainly I can put myself up on this hierarchy. I can be the one sort of through whom God speaks, which puts me in a vaunted position, which means I have power, which means I have power over others. I now have this will to dominate. And so it's not something unique to this movie. That's just sort of the way a lot of cults function, especially especially in the United States, I would say, but that's a worldwide thing.
So, and then at the end, when he finally has them in his clutches, the guy, of course, begs off. It's like, I'll do anything you want. And then he says a line, which, if you're familiar with the, I think it's Don't Menace to Society, it's like, I'll suck your dick. And it's like, boom, dead.
Yeah.
Which I laughed at. So what other things, other than it's just such an oddball of a movie, specifically, what are the things that make you passionate about this movie that you're telling people about? And you're like, you got to see this thing. Like, if you elevator pitch somebody that they have to watch this, what do you tell them?
It's how do I pitch? I mean, first of all, you can't really pitch. I guess you pitch Mandy as sort of the more grindhouse elements of it. This is a heavy metal revenge movie, but it's because it's made by Panos Cosmatos. It's a lot more stylish than that. It's a lot moodier than that. It's sort of an art house grindhouse movie simultaneously, and as such, will play out a little bit differently than you might expect. It's going to feel a lot different than you might expect. What I appreciate is both the affection and the wildness of it. It's not just about extreme, entertaining movie violence. It's this really disturbing fantasy world in which it takes place. It has some pretty wild ideas in it. He doesn't just go out and kill people with a gun. He forges his own bloody axe that he's going to do it with. He doesn't just fight with these people. He gets into chainsaw duels in this sort of parallel heavy metal universe. a combination of the mood and the genre and the style that really brings this forward as something unique and interesting, and something that I think everybody ought to see.
Is there anything about the movie as a critic that you looked at and go, this could have been better, or I didn't like this? Anything that jump out at you?
Let's see, what could I really point to? I think they could have gone a little further into the history of the cult. They talked about how they were just hippies who had taken too much acid. It would have been nice to see, or at least have some sort of words about sort of the idealism of the cult, how it started, how it used to be something maybe positive that they felt. But when we catch up with them, I think audiences are so familiar with that kind of a cult that it doesn't necessarily need that. But it would have been nice to have it regardless. I feel like knowing what sort of twisted ideal they were reaching for would have maybe made us understand the cult a little bit better, make us know those villains a little bit better, and make us not necessarily sympathize with them, but understand them and understand why they did what they did. But at the same time, I do appreciate that they have some sort of league with these Cenobite creatures, which might have been too much. It would have made the world seem a little bit more mechanical rather than the demons being just the sort of natural outcropping of where we're living.
I was getting this kind of Refn feel from the movie. I think this was my somewhat frustration with it. My only real frustration was it seems when you don't have like the Hollywood notes system and you're allowed to just kind of do your art piece and really no other they had a $6 million budget, this go and make your movie. I kept thinking, like, this feels like somebody's very like highly produced student film. Like there's no sense of any kind of studio interference here. It's just whatever crazy thing is in your mind, put it on film. But I think sometimes, and this leads to an even bigger conversation, sometimes when you don't have any kind of control system or anyone sort of weighing in, I think sometimes you fall victim to your own faults as an artist. We tend to focus on the big ones, like a George Lucas, whoever, when he's collaborating with people, he tends to do better than when he just does his own thing, and then he ends up falling victim to some of his shortcomings. My issue here with this one was, and that's why I was thinking about Refn. When I've watched any of Refn stuff, it's these long gazing shots of things and people taking their time through the dialogue, and there's no urgency to kind of move things along, which is the sort of note you get from a studio, which is, hey, we got, as Kevin Smith once said, you got to get the kids to the mall a little bit faster. And so while I can appreciate the artistic lens here of, like, I want, a lot of stuff you were talking about earlier of, we want to show this world and we want to take you on this journey. Like, it's 2 hours to get, it's a 2-hour film that felt like it could have been 90 minutes. Unless you're going to throw in some of that backstory about the LSD, which corrupted all of these people, and the cult, and why they're following him in the first place. When we meet that cult leader, he's on his back berating this woman, and I never really got a sense. Then the next time you see him, he's jerking off in front of Mandy, and I'm like, well, I'd like a little more as to if he's David Koresh, why is he David Koresh? And
right.
Because so far I'm not sold on that. And instead, it's like, we don't need to worry about story, characterization, or any of those things. We need to, this is film, and we need to show you things. And it's like, a little faster. Let's get going. Let's move it a little bit faster. So I think what I'm pointing to is it's a little slowly paced. Maybe a little slowly paced for my liking. But that, but again, you could be watching it and going, I don't need this to go any faster than it's already going. It's perfectly paced the way it is. I'm like, difference of opinion, I suppose. All right. I think we've exhausted all that there is to talk about with Mandy. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up real quick?
No, I think that's it. I think that's it for now. I could go into much greater detail, but no, I think that's it for now.
Okay. Well, before we go, I know I asked you this last time. What are you listening to these days?
What, like in terms of music?
Yeah.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. My car radio is broken. So I drive in silence and I work at home. And unfortunately, there's not a lot I can do about listening to music at home. However, for Christmas, I did get my wife a new turntable. So we're going to try to listen to some records when we get a chance. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm still acquiring music, but I'm not getting a chance to listen to it. I found a rockabilly musician who is friends with the business that is next door to where I work. So they have like this guy's CDs. So I picked up one of those. I got a free 45 with that. I also for Christmas got as a gift, got a membership to the Museum of Jurassic Technology, which is a museum here in Los Angeles that has sort of arcane forms of knowledge on display back when people felt they could manipulate magnetic fields for health and spiritual purposes, or the strange beliefs like, breathing a duck's breath will cure what ails you. It also has some really interesting pieces of art. There's a sculptor who was able to sculpt entire figures literally within the eye of a needle. They're that small, and you need a microscope to look at these sculptures. You would use like an ultra fine yak's hair to make these little plastic sculptures. And they also have music in the gift shop, the kinds of music you might listen to while you're perusing these very bizarre exhibits. So a lot of like ancient folk tunes, and I got one of those. I got some ancient folk tunes to listen to.
Well, that's all very interesting. However, if you're just looking for some modern pop music, while you're working at your desk and you like to write with the music on, I'll tell you, we're giving away a free 30-day trial of Amazon Music Unlimited. If you click the link in the description of this podcast at getamazonmusic.com/W2M network. Again, it's getamazonmusic.com/W2M network. You can partake of our free 30-day trial of Amazon Music Unlimited. Complete the sign-up process. If you like it, you keep it. You pay the monthly fee. If you don't, you can cancel it. No fuss, no muss, no contracts, no nothing. All right. So go ahead and tell people where they can find you. Tell them about your podcast.
Okay, well, I'm doing my podcast from the critically acclaimed network with one Mr. William Bibbiani, and William Bibbiani and I we're doing pretty much a podcast a day. We have podcasts devoted to new films and also television. We do Star Trek, we do Batman. We answer your letters if you want to write into us. We have podcasts devoted to it all, and that can be found at the critically acclaimed network. You just look it up, and we're also on social media. You can find William at William Bibbiani. You can find me at Witney Seibold. That's on the Twitter. We're also on the Instagrams. William has his own soap business. I have my own radio dramas that you can purchase from me directly. Just look us up. And as of just a couple months ago, I started publishing articles on /film. And so you can read my chicken scratchings over there.
What's the plan for the next critically acclaimed? Do you get into the theater to do Redeeming Love, or the Tiger Prince, or the third one whose name I can't remember? It's actually out in theaters this weekend.
The truth of the matter is we get to what we can get to. If it's something we can make it to in theaters, or if we can get to a screening, then we'll do that. If we can get a screener, it's a little bit catch as catch can these days. There's a new Ice Age film that's on a streaming service.
Good old Buck Wild. Yes.
Yeah, we might talk about an Ice Age film just because it's accessible to us. That's kind of where we are. And
that's a great one to watch with your family.
Something else
I
that's
get my
fun
half
to
of
watch.
mine done.
Here's a fascinating one that's being released this week, and we're going to talk about on the next podcast. There's a movie called New York Ninja that was discovered by, I think it was Vinegar Syndrome, the B-movie studio. And what they discovered was this film master of some ninja film from like the mid-90s that had no sound. And I don't think they had a script either, so they had to hire lip readers to approximate what the dialogue of the film was, and then hire actors to record the dialogue. So there's this bizarre patchwork project that was picked up by Vinegar Syndrome called New York Ninja. This really looking forward to that. We're going to be reviewing that one on the next critically acclaimed.
If either one of you have time, Netflix dropped Munich, The Edge of War. I watched it this morning. We're going to be talking about it on Tuesday. Worth a look-see. I enjoyed it. based on a novel, I guess about whatever the treaty was that turned over the Sudetenland to Germany right before World War II. So with Jeremy Irons playing Neville Chamberlain, but it was good. So I if you guys get to it, if that's something that interests you, I'm definitely curious to see what your thoughts on it are. In the meantime, before I get into my plugs, I want to remind everybody that yet another one of our sponsors is Grammarly. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, spelling mistakes, while also catching contextual errors and improving your vocabulary and setting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M Network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M Network to download Grammarly for free. Alrighty. Well, I want to thank Witney for coming on today. This is one of 2 podcasts I'm doing, and one of 2 podcasts that's either directly or tangentially related to you. I don't know if you know that or not. Yes. You have a big influence on my life.
Oh my goodness.
The other thing that you did a little ways back, you had a guy come on, critically acclaimed, and you talked about the life and times of Quibi. And you went through like you went through all these different shows, and the one that stood out to me that I'm like, hey, wait, what now?
I taught that was with B. Peterson. B and I talked a lot about Quibi and the ins and outs of Quibi. They and I were maybe some of the only people to watch Quibi in any capacity, like in like sort of a passionate, positive kind of a way. So
yes,
that
was
also
really one of the things I hear you talk about very often.
That was really fun. That was really fun.
It was a great show. Unfortunately, not a lot of what you guys talked about on Quibi really jumped out at me, but one thing did, and I have sort of tucked it away, and now we're talking about it tonight. 2 of my friends and I were talking Anna Kendrick's Dummy. Because Anna Kendrick palling around with a sex doll is right up my alley.
Okay.
My wife and I watched that last night and laughed our asses off at it. What a weirdo feminist show that was. We need a place for modern, a real take on modern feminism and what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a feminist. Okay, but what about sex doll? Okay. So there it is, this little 90-minute thing that she did with Donald Logue and Meredith, I can't remember the woman's last name, like Hagner, I think. But it was really, really good. And so me and my buddy Jesse from Source Material and Jason Teasley from Second and Short are going to talk about it tonight. So that's what's on the agenda there. This past week we did, what did we do? We reviewed Lordy Abracadaver, Scream 5 or Scream 2022 for the Superblog team up. A bunch of us got together and we reviewed the George Perez illustrated Logan's Run issues to the Logan's Run movie. And then last night, we reviewed Hawkeye season 1. This weekend, we've got an alternative commentary for UFC 270, Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gane. And then kicking off this coming week, we've got a re-air of the time that Jesse, Pat Mullen, and I compared the comic to the movie The Kitchen, starring Melissa McCarthy and Tiffany Haddish. Next week, we've got a triple feature of Power of the Dog, French Dispatch, and Cop Shop, Munich, The Edge of War. We're reviewing the Night Flight Orchestra, Air Romantic 2. Pat Mullen will be back to do the Mania of WrestleMania. We'll be joined by Stuart Lang, formerly of 401mania.com. We'll be doing 14, 15, and 16 this time, the Austin era, as it were. Ronnie Adams will be back to review Wheel of Time with me. And then finally, Gavin Napier, formerly of the Casual Heroes, and I will be doing a commentary for that time Ric Flair won the Royal Rumble and the World Heavyweight Championship. And that we're doing that to celebrate the upcoming Royal Rumble that's happening next weekend. So, all right. Once again, Mr. Seibold, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Hope you'll be back soon. I'll come up with something else wacky that we can do together.
Oh God, I hope so. I hope to always keep your listeners off balance.
Yeah, I want to make people as uncomfortable as possible, and I think you're the right guy to do that with.
Hooray!
All right. Until then, folks, for Witney Seibold, critically acclaimed, I'm Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.